Hello and welcome to Podcast.init, the podcast about Python and the people who make it great. I'd like to thank everyone who has donated to the show. Your contributions help us make the show sustainable. When you're ready to launch your next project, you'll need somewhere to deploy it, so you should check out Linode at linode.com/podcastinit and get a $20 credit to try out their fast and reliable Linux virtual servers for running your next app. You'll also want to make sure that your users don't have to put up with bugs, so you should use Rollbar for tracking and aggregating your application errors to find and fix the bugs in your application before your users notice they exist. Use the link rollbar.com/podcastinit to get 90 days and 300,000 errors tracked for free on their Bootstrap plan. You can also visit our site at www.podcastinit.com to subscribe to the show, sign up for the newsletter, read the show notes, and get in touch. And to help other people find the show, you can leave a review on iTunes or Google Play Music and tell your friends and coworkers. You can also join the community at discourse.pythonpodcast.com to find out about upcoming guests, suggest questions, propose show ideas, and talk to other listeners of the show. Your host, as usual, is Tobias Macy, and today I'm interviewing Rushabh Mehta about ERPNext. So, Rushabh, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi Tobias, this is Rushabh. I'm the founder of ERPNext. ERPNext is an ERP system for small businesses. It helps businesses do accounting, inventory, sales, CRM, purchasing, projects, HR and payroll, and a lot of other stuff. So we're based in Mumbai, India, and we're a team of 15 people now.
And how did you first get introduced to Python?
So I started up as a basic developer. In high school, my first computer was an 8088 PCXT with 640k RAM, and the only thing it would run is text-based software. So I started with GW Basic on MS-DOS, and then I moved up the basic chain with Quick Basic, and then Visual Basic for DOS, and then Visual Basic. And so basically, I was a Windows developer for many years, and then when I was in grad school, I was working on a project that was based in Java, so I had to learn Java, and I did not really like it. And then I attended a conference where people talked about Python, and it was really nice. I checked out Python. The syntax looked just like Basic, and I really liked it. And the more I discovered, the better it was. Lots of libraries, a great community around Python. So basically moved to Python and loved using open source and happy to get away from the Microsoft ecosystem.
So the project that we're talking about today is an ERP system. So I'm wondering if you can explain what that anagram stands for and the kinds of businesses that generally require that kind of software.
Yes, so ERP is basically an enterprise resource planning system. It's basically a system that helps organizations manage all their information. It's basically a data warehouse for an organization. It helps them do accounting, helps them keep track of their orders, their shipments, invoices, payments. That's the core. And then if the organization has inventory, then it helps them keep track of where the material is, how much, what items, what are the serial numbers, what are the lot numbers, what's expiring when, and all of that. And then you also have HR and payroll, which is also kind of integrated in one platform. And then we have project management, you have purchasing. When you're an organization, you have centralized purchasing. So an ERP system helps you manage all of that. And we also have in ERPNext, since it's a web system, we also have a website generator. So, I mean, you already maintain all your products in the ERP system. So your website is just a view of those products. And that's how, so basically ERPNext has lots of features.
And what was the problem that you were trying to solve when you first thought of creating ERPNext? And I'm also wondering what factors led you to the decision of writing it in Python as opposed to Java, which I know is the language that generally gets used for these kinds of systems.
So after I graduated, I joined my family business. My family at that point used to run a business of manufacturing of furniture, and they were reeling from a bad ERP implementation. They had there was a local vendor who was not able to deliver. They had purchased licenses, but the customizations were not coming through, and the whole project was just getting delayed. And in all my foolishness, I thought I should maybe write my own ERP system, and that was the motivation. So this was again in 2005. So in early 2000s, there was a lot of hype around semantic web and using metadata to kind of model stuff. So I used a lot of those concepts and built an ERP system that was based on metadata. So that's how I started using ERP. And ERPNext was actually my first major project in Python. I used to write in Java or Basic, mostly in Basic before that. And so that's how we started with ERPNext.
And what does the architecture of ERPNext look like? And what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced while you were creating it?
So with ERPNext, we also created the web framework. We call it Frappe. So again, this is 2005 when I was building the system. The only framework available for Python developers was Zope, and it was horrible to use Zope because it was not intuitive at all, and I did not like the decisions that were made with Zope. So I started kind of writing at some point I decided I should write my own framework. I think Django was also maybe started around that time, so I didn't know about Django and Flask and other stuff that came in much later. Probably started around the same time, but became popular much later. So basically, I started as a solo developer for the first 2 or 3 years. I was the only guy building the framework and the application on top of it, and that's how we grew. And then my family sold the business, and I continued building the ERP solution for other companies, and that's how I kind of made it into a broader project. In terms of architecting, I think the complexity of building an ERP system is huge because an ERP system is actually a combination of many different kind of projects. Accounting itself is a project. Invoicing is a project. You have an ERP system. You have a report builder. You have a sales system. You have a CRM system. We have emailing, which is out of the box. We have lots of stuff. So basically, just architecting all of this was the biggest issue. So my initial idea, kind of where we have a metadata modeling system, really paid off because of the metadata, we were able to standardize a lot of stuff. We were able to write really targeted code for business logic and not recreate the UI and wiring for every object that we created. So that was a big win, and that helped us build such a large system with a very small team for many years.
And when you started building Frappe to help support your development of ERPNext, did you initially set out to make it a framework from the get-go, or was it something that you extracted from the larger project as it started to take form? Because I know that in a number of cases, a framework is something that gets extracted from an existing project when you realize that there are parts that can be generalized.
So when I started out on my own with a friend, I didn't understand about ERP and like setting it up as a product. That came in a bit later. One of the first projects we got through a reference was to build a management system for a facilities management company. So facility management companies is a company that manages like everything from plumbing, security, housekeeping for large corporations like an entire shopping mall or a bank with multiple branches. So they want a web-based tool where they could track all their sites, and so basically we use the same metadata modeling for that. And I was actually building two projects at the same time, so it kind of made sense to start to build the common libraries as a separate framework. I don't think there was an explicit thought of set out to build a framework, but it just happened that way.
And for somebody who's used to frameworks like Django or Flask, how would you compare Frappe to those systems?
So Frappe comes with metadata modeling that's built in. So the models that you create, the models in Frappe are called doc types, and doc types are also doc types in that sense. And you can create a new doc type from the UI. Also, in Frappe, you get a view which we call the desk, which is a single page JavaScript application that in which you can navigate through all the different models as a user. So it's kind of a Django admin, a very customizable and a very extensible Django admin in a sense. And inside the desk, the forms are all generated from the metadata. So so the UI is actually never generated at the server side. The server only gives out. So we use basically a REST API to manage the information with the server, and the server only throws out JSONs in that sense, and the entire UI is built in JS. So that's one of the big differences. And also we've packed in a lot of stuff in Frappe. We have emails that are integrated. We have real-time integrated. We have background jobs with Python RQ. We have we have lots of stuff. We have a form builder. Then we have a portal UI, which is the more traditional framework UI where you can use Jinja templates to build any custom web interface, and we can kind of call that the portal. So I would say it's a much larger set of libraries that come with Frappe, and that makes it opinionated too.
And given that the front end is so tightly integrated with the rest of the framework, is it possible to integrate other front end frameworks such as React or Angular as well?
Yeah, so like I said, we come with our own view, which is the desk view, which has where you see icons like you would see on an iPad, and then you click an icon, and that's a module, and then you have a list view, a very standardized list view, a very standardized form view, and all that is basically generated from the metadata. So you don't have to write any UI for that. So you have assignments out of the box. So if your form is a customer form and you want to assign a customer to somebody, and it could be any form. So all the assignments and emails and all of that. Users and permissions also comes out of the box. That's another big piece. You could still start your own templates right from scratch, like you would do in Flask. You could set up your own base template and then include your own JS libraries, whether you build it in React or any of that stuff, and then you can use the Frappe REST API to kind of manage the application, the data.
And given that the forms are automatically generated from the metadata that's contained in the models, does it also have automatic form validation as a feature?
Yeah, we have a lot of form validation, like mandatory stuff, and then we have foreign keys which automatically become kind of auto select in the form. So there is a lot of built-in validation, but not everything is configuration. I mean, there is a fine balance you have to hit between configuration and writing code. So a lot of the stuff is very configurable. A lot of the stuff you have to code for, but yeah, a lot of the validations do come built in.
So what are some of the projects that you consider to be your competitors in the ERP space, and what are the features that you think would convince a user to choose ERPNext?
So if you see the ERP space, the biggest competitor we have is Odoo, which is based out of Belgium, and it's probably got a community that's 10 times bigger than ERPNext. But other than Odoo, I think ERPNext is the most actively developed project in this space, and Odoo is also developed in Python. So that's also interesting. So basically, what really sets ERPNext apart is I think it's much better as a project because obviously it's me. So, but generally, it's much more modern in the sense Odoo started, and we also have a unique business model, right? We don't make any revenue from customizations. We don't make any revenue from partners. I mean, that's how usually business-oriented open source projects make money. So we make money on the cloud, which is the end user. And for the entire self-hosted ecosystem, I mean, that's completely kept separate from our commercial activities. So we have a strong incentive to make the application very easy to set up and easy to use and easy to implement, because on the cloud, I mean, that's the reason people are going to subscribe and pay for our application. Versus Odoo, where it derives 85% of its revenue from its partners. So basically the partner faces the end customer, and a lot of the improvements and customizations that the partners don't end up in the core product. And another problem I see with Odoo and a lot of commercial business, commercial open source business apps is that they are fragmented into apps. So basically, Odoo boasts that there are 4,000 apps built on Odoo. And say if you want to build something, so if you want to choose an app, so if you're a user, that's number one, that's terribly confusing, because now you have to go through like 4,000 apps to search for what really works for you. And if you find something, you will find 3 competing vendors giving you the same. And depending on what you choose, so by doing this, everybody's replicating the effort. And just because the whole ecosystem is designed to make money for partners, then people don't have a completely free approach to the way the things happen. So in Odoo, you will most likely come across paid apps, and that's the basic way people make money. And even Odoo makes money because from their current version, they have become paid. So that's one of the big problems I see with Odoo ecosystem. With ERPNext, we have decided we'll make it a monolith application. So when we were designing, when we were implementing ERPNext for a school, we decided that it's not going to be an app on ERPNext. It's going to be a part of the core, because even the school has accounting, even a school has payroll. A lot of things are deeply integrated, and somebody using and somebody else improving. I mean, so the improvements you make for schools also extend for the whole product. So that's one of the core areas where we are separate from Odoo. And there's another big difference is that updates are not part of Odoo. So if you install Odoo, you cannot update it, because the updating tool is a paid service. And if you buy the enterprise license, you only upgrade. But we have built a tool which we call the bench, which is our deployment tool. So it's just running one command, a bench update, and it's going to update your entire app. So that's a big difference.
And for somebody who does want to run ERPNext on their own systems, what are the requirements for that, and what does the scaling story look like for somebody who needs to scale it up to a large deployment?
Yeah, so like I said, we have a deployment tool. We call it the bench, which basically comes with an opinionated production setup. The way so when you deploy an ERPNext instance, we use Nginx. I mean, our production deployment comes with pre-generated scripts for Nginx. We use Supervisor and then Unicorn to manage the web processes. We our background workers are managed by Python RQ, and we have Redis. We use Redis for caching. We use Redis for the queues, and we use Redis for one more thing. So we basically have three Redis. So we use Redis for PubSub with a Node instance. So we also have a Node instance running when you install the Frappe framework for real-time socket-IO communications. So basically, when you're viewing a document, somebody else views a document, you get a small push notification saying who else is viewing the document. So all that real-time communication happens through a socket IO, from a node process that also runs on the server. So this is a fairly complicated setup. We recommend you use a clean system in Ubuntu or a Debian or a CentOS. I think we have Ansible scripts that can do a one-click install on any of. And these days, virtual machines are the norm, right? I mean, you can go on Google Cloud, you can go on Amazon, and it's very easy to set up DigitalOcean and set up a virtual machine and Linode. So basically, just fire up a virtual machine and run our install script, which is based on Ansible, and you get a production setup ready. In terms of scaling, for an ERP application, the bottlenecks are on the database size. So basically, if you're hitting really large scale, database optimization is something where, again, we learn a lot from our own cloud customers. So we have a lot of users who have a lot of data, and we are constantly optimizing our database indexes and all of that. But that's where you have to really work on scaling the database size.
What are the database systems that you support in ERPNext?
Yeah, so we support MariaDB out of the box. We don't support any other system because we also have certain queries that we have written. So Frappe comes with its own ORM, but the ORM doesn't include complex joins and querying. So for complex joins and querying, we just write SQL. A lot of people think that is a problem, but we think it's for an ERP kind of applications, sometimes writing direct SQL queries is so much easier, and it leads to so much cleaner code and also performance. So we are tied to MariaDB for now.
I've definitely been in a number of conversations discussing the relative merits of actually pushing any sort of logic into the database. I know that a lot of people are sort of allergic to the idea, and they want to keep everything encapsulated in their code base and not actually rely on the database itself for doing any sort of logic. But there's also a lot of potential performance gains possible by actually leveraging the capabilities of the database and pushing some of the business logic into that in the form of triggers or stored procedures or things like that. But it does create some complexity in terms of making sure that the database is versioned appropriately, and it can also oftentimes lock you into a particular database vendor, which I know, at least for a number of self-hosted or self-managed applications, people generally want to give you a larger option of the database backend, but it also comes at a trade-off of not being able to gain all of the potential benefits from your database system.
Yeah, we don't use triggers and stored procedures, though. I mean, we use direct SQL for querying. For joins, basically we use SQL. But yeah, I agree, it's a trade-off, and it's also perception, right? That MySQL or MariaDB has lesser features, and then Postgres has more features. But that's changing because the rate at which MariaDB is being updated is also very good, and then it's backed by all the biggest companies are using MariaDB or MySQL for all their apps. So far we haven't come across a use case where we have regretted taking the decision. Sometimes people ask this question on the forums, but these days it doesn't really matter, at least for the kind of users we be looking at.
Yeah, I think a lot of the public perception around MySQL was also tied to the acquisition by Oracle and the way that they were managing the project. But now that MariaDB has split off, there's definitely been a lot of goodwill captured by that move and by the project itself.
Yeah, and they're making a lot of improvements. It's constantly they're pushing new features, and we're pretty happy with the way things are going with MariaDB.
And on the marketing site for ERPNext, it's advertised as being for small and medium businesses. I'm wondering what the characteristics of larger businesses are that might not make them a good fit for the features or structure of ERPNext.
It's smaller and medium businesses. It's only because it's easier to sell to smaller businesses, right? So if you look at the ERP industry, it's not been disrupted for ages. I mean, it's because the larger industries are still tied into the SAPs and the Oracles of the world because it's mission critical. I mean, SAP is still running R3, right? I mean, it's like an ancient piece of software, but people don't take risk with ERP software. So it's very difficult for a new vendor to kind of push into this space, and it's even difficult for an open source kind of platform because open source is still it's great for servers and it's great for backend stuff, but it's still for business software. Open source for the ERP industry itself, it's less than 1% of the total deployments would be probably open source based, at least in terms of revenue. So it's a very small industry. Enterprises have still not warmed up to open source for enterprise, and it's terribly hard to sell to enterprises. And one of the things, me personally, I wouldn't sell to save my life, right? So it's so much easier. I'm a product guy. I love writing code, and that's what I like doing. And so putting it on the cloud and letting people try it out for a 30-day trial or self-hosting it and deploying it on their own is the best way for people to try. And these are mostly small businesses, innovative businesses, businesses who are in the new age kind of, whether it's open hardware or whether it's, ride sharing and, all those kinds of businesses, climate related businesses like solar. We have farms, farm equipment companies. We have 3D printing companies. So and biotech companies, genetics. So it's the newer kind of industries are actually using ERPNext.
So, what are some of the most interesting or unexpected ways that you've seen ERPNext put to use?
Like I was saying, we have a lot of these new age businesses. So recently there is there is an Uber-like company in India which is using ERPNext, and they're building they're building a full ride sharing system on top of ERPNext. And along with rides, they're also doing deliveries. They're doing meals. I mean, it's all based on the common platform. So I had a chance to visit them a couple of weeks ago, and that was really exciting. And we are always surprised by the kind of companies that use ERPNext. I mean, like I said, we have 3D printing companies, electronics manufacturers, and surprisingly on our cloud, the highest number of paid subscribers are IT service companies. So even though the ERP is traditionally built for a manufacturing kind of a company, but apparently there is a lot of market, at least for the kind of positioning we have for service companies too.
Yeah, as I was looking through the list of features, particularly the CRM capabilities, I was trying to think about ways that I could potentially put it to use for managing the podcast and the guests that I have on here, because that's one of the problems that I've run into is being able to keep track of all the people that I've contacted with. And for the time being, I've been using a Trello board, but it doesn't really do a good job of being able to capture their contact information along with the stage of the workflow that they're at.
Yeah, you should definitely have a look. I'm happy to help. If you ever need help, just ping us, or you can ping me, and I'll be happy to help you.
And are there any common issues that you have people contact you about when they're trying to implement ERPNext for their businesses?
So we have a very active community. We have more than 900 issues open on GitHub. Most of the issues, if you see, are especially so most of the issues come whenever we release a new version. So people migrating to the newer version, that's when we have the highest amount of support. So right now we're between versions, so we're relaxed. The issues do come up about installation upfront, but those have also kind of, so we moved everything to Ansible based scripts, and you can easily edit those scripts and you can tweak it to build your own deployment. So installation things have become much lesser. But the people who use this application are also not tech-oriented people. These are small business owners or managers in small businesses who really don't know what a Linux. They never interacted with the Linux command line, and are just probably this is their first real exposure to setting up something like this. And a lot of newbie questions around that, a lot of questions like so basically that's one, and the others are around customization. So once they hit so in the middle, so if you're able to set it up, I think using it is fairly simple because, like I said, we are a cloud-first company. And then the questions come around customization, where people want to have custom scripts, they want to have different formats for their invoices, they want to set up custom workflows, and then eventually create their own models and extend the product. So a lot of questions around customization.
And are there any interesting projects or features that you're working on for release in the near future that people might be interested in hearing about?
So one of the biggest barriers for small businesses to use such a thing, especially like I said, these are end users who really don't understand the Linux command line, is the whole client server setup. And I know we're talking about cloud and software as a service and all of that, but the vast majority of businesses, I think, are still offline in that sense. If you're using an accounting application or a point of sale, it really makes sense to build an offline first application. So what we're experimenting right now is to build a full offline version of ERPNext, or at least a part of ERPNext. We'll call it maybe a small accounting app, and then put it up for download. And then so we're building this off Electron, the Electron framework in JavaScript. We'll probably integrate it with our current architecture, where the kind of models and the doc type concept that we have, we'll still use the framework to kind of design the models, and then it will spit out maybe a JS app that we can then compile, and then it will be available for download. So if you're a small business, you could just download it and start using it for invoicing and your daily accounting. And you'll be surprised, there is no good open source accounting application for small businesses. You have Ledger SMB, and you have some stuff which is really ancient, but there is no real modern accounting application which is widely used for accounting. So we're thinking that seems to be a much bigger need in that sense. And we've learned a lot over the years about small businesses with ERPNext. We've learned about the functionality, and we're really excited about going this offline first way. And then if we build this offline first, then we'll also build the mobile apps in that sense. So that's something we're currently experimenting with.
And so that would be for people to be able to use it as a desktop-based application and not have to require interfacing with any sort of servers at all. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it'll be a desktop-based application which will be based on Electron, still be written in JavaScript, and it'll be offline first. And then we'll also have an option if they want to, if they have a Frappe server at the backend, they can make it into a multi-user application. So we want to build it that way. Build it offline first, but also make it like a multi-user thing if they want to do it.
And is there any sort of minimum size of business that you think it would make sense for using ERPNext, or is it really something that is useful for any scale of business, even if it's just a single user?
So it depends on the maturity of the business, according to me. If you're hurting with data, like you say, you're probably hurting with your contact list, for example. That's when you really start looking in ERP. You could be a single person, or you could be, you could be a company. Even as a company, you could be happy with Excel sheets. Maybe if you're a 20 people company, but but at some point, you will realize that things are not in order. Like either you're missing deadlines, or you're falling back on certain stuff, and that's when you want things to be organized. You go for an ERP. It really doesn't depend on size as much. After a certain size, it becomes a necessity. But smaller businesses are as complex as a larger business. So even if you are a single, if you're a furniture manufacturer, if you're a carpenter. And you're not too much different from a furniture manufacturer in that sense, because still you're buying material, you have products, you have deadlines, you have customers, you have to keep track of. So it actually depends on do you feel the need for it.
Are there any other topics that you think we should cover before we start to close out the show?
No, I think it's been good. We've covered a lot.
Okay, so for anybody who wants to follow you and keep up to date with what you're up to, what would be the best way for them to do that?
I'm there on Twitter. We have a very active forum. Discuss. I could type it out.
Yeah, you can just fill in the contact information. So for anybody who wants to see what you're up to, they can just look at the show notes, and those will be on the website, and they'll also be included in your podcast app of choice. And so with that, I will move us on into the picks. My pick this week is just going to be WordPress, because I've been using it for actually rebuilding the website for the show, and it's made things a lot simpler than trying to build it all out custom. So for people who are interested in having a fairly easy to manage and deploy website with a fair amount of customization capabilities, WordPress is still a good option. And with that, I will pass it to you. Do you have any picks for us this week, Rushabh?
I just finished reading this book today. I don't know if the Ready Player One. It's a book on gaming and geek culture. I don't know if you read it.
I have not read it yet, but I've heard a number of people recommend it, so I'll definitely have to check it out sometime soon.
Yeah, so that's my recommendation. If it's a geek fantasy novel, and I just found out Spielberg making a movie on it. So if you grew up with computers and gaming, and it's amazing. It's really nice.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join me and talk about ERPNext. It definitely sounds like an interesting system and one that I'll likely be checking out to see if there are any ways that I can use it in my business and in my podcasting. So I appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Tobias. Thanks for having me. It was really nice talking to you. And and I hope wish you all the best for more podcasts.
Great.